So here's what you get when you have the Goose Gear Stealth Sleep package for the Jeep Wrangler. You're going to see that you have the driver's side delete, which is the lower left section of the picture here. You're going to have the passenger side delete, which is the 60% at the top right. And then you're going to have your rear plate system. The combination of each of these modular components is what creates the Stealth Sleep package. And because of that modularity, it's one of those things that's unique, is you're not stuck to having a system that once you've changed potentially what you're hauling, or even have a trip that requires different needs, you can come back and reinsert the driver's side seat, the passenger side seat, or any combination thereof. And all of it just requires a couple nuts and bolts, and each system piece can be used with any other two parts that are in the package. The nice part about the Stealth Sleep package is it incorporates all the components under one part number, so you don't have to mix and match. It just makes the ordering portion easier. So looking here at the rearmost section, this is the rear plate system that you can order. And as with many of the products with Goose Gear, you're allowed to make some options and changes. So this is the most common configuration and the one that you're going to see me running. Something to look at when you are ordering this, you do have to specify whether or not you have this subwoofer. And if you do have that subwoofer, there is a different plate system for it. And you additionally have the ability to move the rear access panel. So you still keep the storage area on the bottom, but whether or not you're going to be putting in their camp kitchen, which I will be doing soon, or if you're going to be doing other things that you know of that are going to utilize the mounting, you can take this particular compartment opening and move it from either the passenger side, which is shown here, or move it over to the driver's side. So again, these are just options you have to place when you order the product from Goose Gear. So getting right into the removal part of the installation, we're going to slide the rear panel back. There's this factory filler panel, which kind of bridges the gap between the flat rear section and the upward angle of the seats as they're in the down position. This is on a metal surface that you're not going to see anything with. If you have panel poppers, that'll be adequate. Here, a flat blade screwdriver does the trick. There's nothing to be damaged here that's going to be seen. So again, use what you have. This panel does pop out pretty easily, and once we have the panel out, we can move on to the next step, where we're going to have to remove the side trim panels next to that rear plate, and basically just take a screwdriver here, expose the Torx bit pieces, and once we get all of those popped up, we'll have 6 large Torx bit screws, and we'll pull those up as well as the little D-ring hooks and remove each of those side panels. This should clear up our rear area, and we'll move on to the next section of the installation, which requires actually removing that bar that mounted that filler panel. And here again, there's 3 bolts as you go across the back. We are not going to reuse this, so go ahead and set this aside. Now we need to move to the seat section, and here we have some primary bolts to get to. Let's get the floor mat out of the way. The main bolts here, there's 4 of them on the bottom. These are very tight. Again, this is for what makes the seat mount to the floor. Seat belts are in the area, so obviously these are going to be pretty tight for safety reasons. So you may have to use a wrench and a little bit more force to get this loose before you use our light duty impact to get things out. Here, just get all of those bolts loose. Don't forget the one here that joins the 2 in the middle. And then once that's loose, we can use our light duty impact here to basically spin the bolts out. These are sort of lock nuts, so it does take a little bit of force. Again, once we get through that, there is one more here that's unique that's in the center section. We'll get that loose, and then we're going to move down below. Let's get the other mat out of the way, and there's the same 4 bolts here and a 5th one that we'll show you at the very end. Same thing. These are again a self-locking style nut that's welded to the bottom for the fact that this is a safety component with seats and seat belts. So let's get all of those broken loose by hand, and I'm going to take my light duty impact here and spin them the rest of the way out. There is one more bolt that goes into the side here that joins the 2. We'll get that bolt out here, and this one on the side will do that, and we're ready to pull the seats out. And the driver's side seat pulls out fairly easily. Just lift the side edge and pull away from the center pin, and just make sure you don't scratch anything on the way out the door. Now, the passenger side is a little more difficult because we do have the seat belt in the bottom, and this is a bolt that is exposed on the bottom, but I couldn't get a wrench onto to loosen as it was very tight. Again, it's a seatbelt bolt, so I'd imagine it's something they don't want coming loose under any conditions. So I'm going to try to get the seat in a awkward position here, but one that I can go to the other side and get my high torque impact on. Again, I couldn't fit this under the seat because of the angle, as you can see here, but it does have a lot of force that's required to remove this bolt. It is a locking style bolt, and as you can see, it will come out. And once we have that bolt out, just take your time again and make sure you don't scratch anything pulling the seat out. So here we're going to go into the assembly phase, and I'm going to be working with the panels in the reverse order that we've just gone through and removing the components. So I'm going to start with the passenger side rear seat delete, which is the 60% side, then go to the 40% side and then put the rear plate system in. The cool part about working with this system is its modularity, in that all of these parts were made to work as a standalone, which means they can be removed one by one or in groups. This means if you have a particular outing that you need to use your seat or you want to reconfigure, in under a half an hour with hand tools and under about a dozen bolts, you should be able to get this in and out and reconfigured. They even provide you with bracketry that's unique to their system that'll allow you to move the seats in a way you cannot factory, being that one of the brackets required to use the driver's side or the passenger side independently is actually attached to the passenger side seat. This means that you cannot run the configuration even on your own without having a problem of reinserting the product. So they've even designed that bracket, which you see here, which allows you to have the ultimate in reconfigurability. Taking a look at that 60% rear seat delete section, this is the bottom, so we can admire all the construction that Goose Gear puts into their product line. Here we see that Baltic birch wood material. You can see bleeding through on the edges, the coating that they put on the top. That's that kind of patented coating that they have made for them. And of course the construction. We've got nut certs throughout the entire wood for threading, as well as that 80-20 aluminum T-slot, which is the primary means of attaching each of the adjustable panels. In working with T-slot, you're going to have a couple things to look at. Of course, we have the bolt here with the little T-nut that goes in the bottom. This is going to be put in loosely, and I do reiterate, put this in loosely. We don't want this to be a tight fit at this point in time. We've got to get this in the vehicle to make some adjustments. So we want to make sure that we align each of the bolts and the little T-slot nut, just as you see here. Here's an insert shot that you can see on the last piece, how it should go in, and again, how loose it should be when we go to install the part. Here's the next panel we're going to work with. This is the center support. The first panel we just put in is for the very front, which goes nearest the seat. And as you can see, this one does have a cutout provision for where it has to span the center hump. Now we have to add the mounting bolts. These actually pass through and reuse the factory seat mounts in the floor. And if you notice, there's a lot of slot and oversized holes with washers here. This is to account for all the different variations in the floorboard, whether you've added additional padding, have factory rubber floor mats, or actually have the carpeted interior. So keep these loose so that we can make adjustments once we put the panel in the vehicle and on the carpet. Now we have to loosen some existing parts that were already installed on this upper panel. These 3 bolts here loosened will allow us the ability to slide that 80-20 T-slot aluminum extrusion on the bottom off, so we can slide in this new center panel that we've just prepared. Pay attention to what side of the T-rail that this is being installed on, and we're going to do the same technique. Make sure that the T-rail nuts and the bolt that goes inside are properly aligned and loose. We want to make sure this panel slides in easily, and then go ahead and reinstall that 80-20 extrusion T-slot. Put this into place, don't worry about tightening it, and make sure that this panel is still loose. Now we can take that full assembly, slide it through the door, and get everything kind of aligned in position. Here you can see why we need to have that panel loose, so we can do some fine tuning as it sits directly on the carpet, lining up all the bolt holes. Thus, we have to keep in consideration that all of these panels that do mount to the floor and to each other will have to be left somewhat loose. We just want to make sure that the brackets are in place and that they reuse the factory hardware, but again, leaving everything loose till we're all the way finished. Here's a quick top view of where we're at. You can see that front panel closest to the seat is installed. We do have that middle panel that arches through that center hump. All of this is just loosely assembled so that we can move on to the next part, which is going to be very similar as we move into the 40% section of that second row rear seat delete. Working on the driver's side section is going to be identical to what we did to the passenger side, but just a little shorter. So here we do have to slide that front panel in. We want to make sure that our T-nut and bolt slides into that 80-20 correctly. And then we're going to prep that center support piece that has the brackets that mount down to the floorboard. With all of that there, we're still going to go through the same process that we went with the previous part on the passenger side, which is loosening the top bolts here so that we can flip it over and slide out that T-rail so that we can get the center section support slid into place. Same thing again, make sure we line up all of the T-slot nuts and bolts and loosely place this inside. We now have to replace that T-slot extrusion, and that just means sliding it through those T-nuts that are passed through the top. We'll flip it over, and once we have everything kind of in place, we want to get these snugged back up because the T-rail itself doesn't need to move, but we need to make sure that the panels underneath are capable of moving. So we're now ready to take a look at the bottom side and make sure everything is loosely assembled, and we're now ready to go ahead and install this on the driver's side of the vehicle. With everything loosely assembled, we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side, which is lay this down on top of all the appropriate bolt holes, check for alignment, and the first thing I'm going to work on with this is getting the joining plates. So this is a part that is offered so that we can join the plates from side to side to provide better rigidity. Here we're going to make sure that this is the first thing we do so that we can get everything aligned. You can see there's a lot of movement here in getting the appropriate gaps, so making sure that everything is loose first before putting this plate in will make it substantially easier. And now we can reuse those factory seat mounting bolts and get those started in the floor. And again, don't tighten these all the way until we get the rear plate system in, which is coming up next. To install the plate system is probably the easiest aspect. It's almost all complete. Basically, we're going to go ahead and lay this down and slide it up to the frontmost position. Maneuver yourself all the way to the front so that we can get to the bolts that are actually pre-installed on each of the passenger and driver side. We'll get all of those loose so that we can slide the plate all the way up to where the bolts line up. And here I'm starting with the driver's side, so I'm going to get both of the bolts that go into that plate, into that system. And then I'm going to move one over to the passenger and get that middle one started. Then get to the back, and as you can see, it needs to be shifted to get the bolt holes to line up. And now I'm going to go ahead and install some of that hardware to kind of hold that into place. And I'm going to move on to putting in the rear filler panel. And that filler panel is just a replacement for the plastic removable part. You pop it out, you put 2 screws in, and you get a nice finished look when it's all said and done. Take a few moments to work your way around the panels and make sure that any of the bolts that we started for alignment that we didn't finish tightening, we get those. There's seatbelt bolts in the bottom, we got to make sure block holes. And then we can go ahead and install all of the access panels and take a look at what the final fitment looks like, if there's any adjustments that need to be made. And if not, we've just completed the installation for the Stealth Sleep Package by Goose Gear. Now I've got a chance to kind of figure out what my gear loadout's going to be, what's going to go where do I want to carry the heavy stuff, am I going to want to put the side panels in? This is an option with the Goose Gear product that they do have closeouts for either side, but a lot of the stuff I put in I want to have quick access to. If I have my gear already set up for sleeping, do I want to have to actually take my gear away, move the mattress, or be able to just open a door and get my hand in from the side? These are all things that I've got to test out and figure out, but the great part about Goose Gear is they have options. So I'll get out on the trail, figure out what I like, give you guys some feedback on what my experiences are and the best utility I have for this in my application. So hit the like button if you want to see more content, hit notifications to make sure you're at the front of the line on the newest content for the channel. Otherwise, thanks again for your time and hope to see you soon.